morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you may be. I'm Claude Granitsky. This is our weekly True Africa University and MIT webinar series. For those who've been following us since we started on the 4th of March, we've explored many different topics related to the future of Africa and what we're calling the main issues around sustainable development in Africa. Now, we won't talk about sustainable development only with respect to the economy and how political choices can influence African futures. Today, we're going to be exploring another topic within the creative industries, which is the art market. Now, a lot of people don't know how fast the contemporary art market is actually growing around the world. Sotheby's has estimated that from 2017 to 2019, we had a 30 to 50% growth in sales at Sotheby's for contemporary art from Africa. Now, this is major, even though African art sales are still less than 1% of all global art sales at Sotheby's and worldwide. It is now a trend, and many people have started collecting African art, including many Africans. Now, today, I'm really happy to be in conversation with a friend who's actually also a very successful cultural entrepreneur. And our topic today is, what is the market for contemporary art from Africa? We're going to be looking at how it's grown, what's going to happen in the next few years, who's interested in this, who are some of the artists who are actually leading on this front. And I guess I couldn't have picked a better webinar leader for today because Touria El Glaoui, my friend Touria, I can say, is really one of the people who have been instrumental in shaping this new market around contemporary art. And she's at the center of many of the discussions happening between the galleries, between auction houses like Sotheby's, between artists, and essentially what I love about Turya is that she is like myself. She's a first generation founder, and she just had an idea and she made it happen, as opposed to many people who have ideas and talk about it but never make it happen. She just made it happen. Touria El Glaoui is the founder of the 154 Contemporary African Art Fair. She was born and raised in Morocco. She completed her education in New York before beginning a career in the banking industry, wealth management. Now that sounds a bit strange, but in any event, she pivoted after 10 years in the field. She left New York and went to London, where she initiated 154 in 2013. So that was 8 years ago. In those 8 years, she has been able to launch 154 in, London where it started, but she also launched it in New York in 2015 and also in Marrakech in 2018. The first edition for 2021 was hosted at Christie's Auction House in Paris. And Touria is heading a platform that is one of the leading platforms devoted to contemporary African art from Africa and the African diaspora. She is always in the media, always in the press. Everybody always wants to write about her achievements. Touria El Glaoui was listed amongst the 100 most powerful women in Africa by Forbes magazine. She is among the 50 most powerful women in Africa, according to Jeune Afrique, a distinction she held in 2015, 2018, and 2019. And New African magazine calls her one of the 100 most influential Africans in business. And this is what, she's been there since, for quite a few years. She's also very modest. And just about myself, Claude Granitsky, for those who are tuning into our webinar series for the first time, I'm the founder of two media companies, Trace and True Africa. And both of those media companies have been devoted to championing the creativity of African youth. That's one of the things we're going to be talking about today. I'm a product of the MIT environment as well. I got an MBA from MIT, and I'm launching True Africa University because my team and I, we really want to help define actionable ways to nurture Africa's talent. This series was brought to you by the MIT Center for International Studies, CIS as we call it. It aims to support and promote international research and education at MIT. We support and produce research that creatively addresses global issues while helping to educate the next generation of global citizens. The website is cis.mit.edu if you want to learn more. And our other partner for this webinar series, which started on March 4th and ends on May 13th, is the MIT Africa program. Based at CIS at MIT, the MIT Africa program empowers MIT students and faculty to advance knowledge and solve the world's greatest challenges by connecting the students and the faculty to leading researchers, companies, and other partners in African countries. The website is misti.mit.edu, misty.mit.edu. Now, I say this every week, and I really want you to spread the word and support us by telling people about our webinar series and about True Africa University, if you like what we're doing, of course. And I say this because I created True Africa University because I was looking to launch a Pan-African learning community that would be committed to accelerating Africa's sustainable development by mobilizing a global network of academic, industrial, and institutional partners. Now, it is with great pleasure that I introduce Touria El Glaoui, founder of 154 Art Fair.
Well, thank you, Claude. Thank you, True Africa University and the MIT team, for putting these webinars together. They're extremely interesting, and I have attended a few of them myself. The only thing you missed out of this crazy, life I had is that I'm the daughter of a very established artist. And I'm saying that because I refer a lot to my dad, who probably gave me, all the art education, I had to get, in Morocco, as they didn't have all the cultural platforms that we have today, or what we see in Africa today. And it's probably thanks to him that I decided, to start this adventure myself. And to give you a bit of background, I think 154 was born out of the culmination of me trying to organize an exhibition of my father's work in London at this beautiful museum called Leighton House Museum, which kind of made me realize how difficult it was and challenging it was for even established artists to get visibility on a global stage because of the challenges of where they were based, including visa, logistics, shippings, and the network you needed to get this visibility possible, and me being based in London and with all the network I had, it was still one of the most challenging exhibitions I had to organize. So it really gave me a great insight on the difficulties for artists based on the continent to get access, to this global, international stage. And the second thing is, through my professional career, my past professional career, I had the chance to go around Africa and quite a lot. And this is where basically I had my first, I guess, experience in discovering those local artistic scenes and those amazing talents in those different trips, I was taking for my professional career. And this is also where I realized how, as soon as I would leave the continent and go back to Europe or to the US, that there was absolutely no trace of those amazing talents, that I was discovering on the continent. It was like their established, reputation locally was not crossing over the geographical boundaries. And there was absolutely no trace of those artists in international museums. They didn't belong to any international collection. And this basically those two moments that, in a way empowered me to decide to create this platform that I really wanted to bridge this gap. So 154 was really created with this mission of providing visibility for artists coming from the African continent and the African diaspora. I wanted to make sure that, we were part of the collective effort that will make the art market and the art world much more inclusive. And for people who are not very familiar with the art world in general, before we started 154 and well before 154, the art world was really always dominant with the Anglo and Eurocentric, part of the art world. The whole continent of Africa was kind of disregarded. I don't think if it was on purpose, but it was definitely, a lack of access of those artists, on the global stage. And now knowing more about, the challenges of the African continent in terms of, having access to all those different networks, it really gave me an understanding of why, 154 and a platform like 154 Contemporary African Art Fair was instrumental to create, new opportunities and new platforms for artists from the continent and the African diaspora. So why the model of an art fair, and why not, a gallery gallery or an African, an African platform of some kind of a cultural platform. So for the people who are not part of the art world, so basically art fairs are the most important instrument, I guess, in the art world for sales, but also they are bringing galleries from all over the world, to facilitate a convergence of different actors of the art scenes, and are definitely instrumental for meetings, for sales, but also as a marketplace. And before we did 154, and I have to say that there was this whole, platform of art fairs that was completely not accessible for artists from the African continent and the African diaspora. When I started in 2013, 154, and I was working through FIAC, which is considered one of the most important art fair for contemporary art world in Europe, there was approximately 0.04% artists from the continent or from the African diaspora present at this event. So obviously you can see how, these needed to change, and we needed to give access to artists from the continent for them to take their, place into this international art market. So the art fair was created really with the mission of trying to make and address this non-inclusive nature of the mainstream art fairs. We wanted it to be a specialized art fairs, but to still keep it as inclusive as possible. We wanted Africa and its diaspora to be at its center, but not, making it not making it as a place that was disconnected from wider social concerns. And we wanted to make sure that our artists from Africa and from the continent and from the diaspora, with their myriad experiences and idea, would resonate with different and beyond their geographical boundaries. So since 2013, the good news is that we have made a lot of progress, even if the journey is still very long. But walking through FIAC in 2019, before the COVID, we had, out of 795 artists presented at this event, 33 coming from Africa and its African diaspora. It doesn't sound like a lot, it's only 40%, but it's definitely much better than 0.05%. So the journey is long, but I think we are definitely in a better place right now. So I will ask if we could play the short video, and this is a short video from the London edition in 2016 in London. And I just wanted to give you a bit of a vibe and what is 154 about.
154 stands for 54 countries. We never have the chance to have all of them, but this year we're very excited to have new ones on board.
All the galleries that have been selected are all highlights because it's outstanding works and artists that they are bringing to London.
So the galleries that just started this year in Ghana or Ethiopia or even in Egypt have really been change actors and really changed the visibility of their artists already.
With the beginning of 15 galleries, we are today, after only 4 years, at 40 galleries, and I think this is a very good development. The professionals from the market, galleries, and the professionals from the production and artistic side have adhered to the initiative and are constantly coming back.
Hi, I'm Zach Ove. I'm the artist of this installation here at Somerset House. I've shown here now, I think, 3 times. And what it's been able to do for artists like me is to profile work that wouldn't otherwise be seen in this context to curators and, if you like, galleries and museum people from all over the world that have come specifically for the fair. And this fair has been brilliant in looking at how the beginnings of new contemporary African artists and diasporic artists from around the world and showcasing them as new talent.
Since we started the fair, we thought it was necessary to have a platform where critical conversation could take place. So we launched 154 Forum in 2013.
It provides insight into an artist's kind of practice through artist talks. It provides insight into certain themes, into certain environments.
I think on one hand, we have a time, I'd say, of unprecedented cultural influence for black people, black men, but at the same time, high vulnerability. Being a black man isn't a kind of neutral position.
The artistic production hailing from Africa and the African diaspora has always been strong. It's just the visibility that was shadowed, and 154 is one of those platforms that are, you know, lifting that shadow or those veils.
154 is one of its kind. It's the leading platform for contemporary African art and artists from the African diaspora.
The entire fair is always a highlight.
So to give you a small example is that Zach Ove, who you saw, presenting his work in the main court, because he participated to this fair, we had the chance to have that installation of sculpture presented in San Francisco and Los Angeles. And it was seen at 154, it was bought by a collector. So those are opportunities that, art fairs are providing that are necessary to be part of this international and global, narrative of the contemporary art world. So we have 3 annual fairs, pre-COVID at least. We had one in London where we started in 2013, one in Marrakech, and one in New York. All the 3 cities are very different, and this is why the reason we chose them to be in those continents. We work really hard to respond to the different demand of each locality from an artist perspective, but also from cultural spaces and collectors, which make each edition very different. So if you visit London or New York, you will not at all have the same experience. But Africa and artists from Africa and the African diaspora are definitely at the forefront of everything we do. So the London Art Fair that we started it in the heart of London, in a place called Somerset House that you've seen in that video. We started with one wing of this beautiful space, and then we took over the whole building. Last year, pre-COVID, in 2019, we were able to welcome 45 galleries representing more than 140 artists at the fair. It makes a very big difference for a lot of those artists who are meeting exhibition curators, institutions, collectors. For some of those artists, it is the first time that they have a platform, an international platform, that they're also written on, in our catalog, and being, in discussions with different curators. In 2015, we decided to go to New York, again, for people who are not very familiar with this world, but let's say that in the art world, New York is probably the art center, and the places like London, France or Italy or Switzerland are considered like semi-periphery to the US. A continent as large as it is, like Africa, is definitely considering like a faraway periphery, and that's why probably this whole continent was not part of those discussions before we started bringing all this artists and art and artworks to Europe or to the US. So the US, it was pretty much kind of easy for us, as we kind of had already the blueprint from London that worked. The first iteration, took place in 2015 in this art foundation in Brooklyn called the Pioneer Works. It was very successful, and we were able to replicate, the fair for the past 5 years. Unfortunately, we had to cancel for the first time last year because of the sanitary crisis that was that fell into New York, and the event was scheduled to be in May 2020. Again, we used the same blueprint to go to Marrakech. So Marrakech was a bit of a different story because Marrakech was always in the cards. We really wanted from the beginning to be present on the African continent with the fair, but we knew how important it was for the artists and the galleries to be present internationally first. We chose, Marrakech as a city in Africa, as we wanted to make sure that we were able to subvention the sales with international collectors, as we need to right now. So we launched Marrakech in 2018, and we were very successful for the last 3 years until we had to cancel this year, unfortunately, because of the COVID. But I mean, we all plan to go back in 2022, so we hopefully be able to launch our 4th year in Marrakech next year. What happened during the COVID, you know, for events like 154, which still are, you know, support the same strong mission, is that we had to cancel a few shows. So we did cancel New York in 2020, and we unfortunately had to cancel this edition as well, as most of our galleries from Africa and from Europe cannot travel to the US for the moment without doing a quarantine, and it's a bit challenging to travel. But in terms of replacing our real live events, we were able to create digital platforms to make new avenues for artists and collectors to know more about those artists coming from the continent and the African diaspora. It worked really well and provided, you know, great avenues of sales, you know, for artists during this pandemic. Also, thanks to, in a way, the COVID opportunities arose, we had the chance to collaborate with Christie's, which is one of the largest auction house in the art world, to provide us with an online platform. So they provided us our 2 first online editions of 154 in New York and in London, where we're able to do a hybrid model with a physical event and an online complement, you know, thanks to them. And finally, when we had to cancel Marrakech this year, and it was sure that it was not going to be able to happen, Christie's, through our collaboration in London, proposed that we tried a new city with them, and they gave us their space in Paris to launch our first edition in Paris. So overall, you know, compared to other art fairs, we were able to manage 2 events in 2020, which was very important for the African art market for one reason only, is that during this pandemic, even if everybody came out with digital platforms to replace the physical, you know, aspect of the fairs, a lot of the collectors were much more confident to buy from galleries that they knew from before, and artists that also had established names or established, you know, galleries. So for a lot of our market, that is a very young market for the moment, you know, a lot of galleries are just starting from 1 to 3 years ago. They don't have the same contact list as galleries from New York or from Europe. So being able to provide them with a platform digitally and physically is still very important for those galleries and artists to make contact to institutions, but also to collectors. And that's why 154 in its mission is still very important, that we are able to function and continue to provide this visibility for artists from the continent and from the African diaspora. So as I said, Paris was honestly an opportunity from the COVID. I hope we will be able to do it again, but it was in a way the possibility to do the fair when we couldn't do Marrakech, and to explore new cities with new collectors, new institutions to present to our collectors and to our artists and to our galleries. So if we had to look into the future, as I said, I think the fairs are still an instrumental tool, you know, for the art market in terms of making it to sales, and very important for artists from the continent, you know, to be part of this, you know, global art market. So in the close future, you know, 154 not being able to do the physical edition in New York, will have a digital edition coming up. So from the 17th to the 3rd of May, you should watch out that if you want to register on the website to receive our newsletter, you know, it will be amazing. And Christie's will still provide us support this year, you know, with their space and their digital platform, to be able to make sure that we get as many visibilities and access to new collectors in New York as possible. We will be able to do in their space a hybrid you know, curated show called Not a Tie. So we'll have the digital platform and a curated show in their space at Rockefeller Center, which is also an amazing window of visibility for those artists who will be in such a obviously important auction house for the first time. So anybody in New York, you know, who could visit the show, I will definitely encourage them to go see the work of those fabulous women artists who will be presented at this show. The idea is, you know, to be able to keep a fair going, you know, no matter what, because as I explained, it is quite an important meeting and connecting place for the art world, to connect to the new galleries that will represent them internationally, but also to connect them to institutions. We know that institutions, are quite important in the journey of an artist, to make their work also more valuable. And in that case, having different acquisitions from museums, is still in a way very important for artists' careers. So for me, the fairs are here to stay, at least a bit longer, and hopefully as soon as they will be, quite safe to visit, you will see them appearing again everywhere in their physical forms. In the general landscape on the markets, the things I wanted to say is that we are still very relatively small compared to the international market. What this geography represents is still very small. If you look at the sale figures, we had the chance to have a constant growth, small but very constant and steady. And this is what we are looking for. We would be very concerned if there was a steep rise. We not are trying to get a boom similar to what the Asian market had, known a couple of years back. What I want to say is that even if the picture is positive and we see a growth, to keep things in perspective, I wanted to share some numbers. So the total sales in auctions for artists coming from Africa, from Africa, the African diaspora, represent a smaller number than the total sales of Romania. So just to give you a bit of a comparison of whole continent compared to a country. So in terms of the graphs that I wanted to share with you, there are a few. So in 2016, we had the chance to, first of all, get those graphs shared by Coringol and Co. It's very difficult to get stats on the art market for this particular region, but thanks to Coringol and Co., which is a research consulting company based in South Africa, she provided us with those 3 slides. And what this first slide is showing is that in 2016, we saw the largest numbers of new galleries opening up in South Africa. And this is the amount of galleries that opened up in every country that is listed on this slide, with a high numbers being open in South Africa. For people who are not very familiar with the geographies, South Africa is still considered one of the biggest hub of contemporary art for the continent, probably followed by Morocco and Nigeria. And this is what you can see is the number of new galleries opening up. In 2016, we saw this huge impact, of galleries opening up in Ghana, but also in Ethiopia, in Egypt, a lot of them in South Africa. And that gives you an idea about, how just one gallery can have as an impact, in a typical country, in a typical country. So in a space like in the UK, you would have, I don't know, hundreds of galleries representing different, contemporary artists. In the case of a country as big as Ethiopia, you will have one contemporary gallery for the whole country. So there's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of work that is already being done, but it is quite impressive for me to see, how the journey of artists have changed since that particular gallery has opened locally, in Ghana or in Ethiopia or in Egypt, for example. So the second slide that I have that we might be able to share is showing, how the ecosystem is on the continent. So it is mainly galleries. We have 57% of cultural platforms that are galleries on the continent. And I have to say, this is quite interesting and, positive for sales and for the commercial aspect of things, but we're not doing very well, when it comes to foundation, to auctions, to also art fairs, but also the different, residency program. And it's important for us in the future that we make sure that we have a more balanced chart in a way, because this is where we want to make sure that we have, quite a good ecosystem of platforms on the continent. I know the commercial aspect seems to be the most important one, but the rest are also important for the validity and the credibility of the artist journey on the continent. So we're hoping to see definitely, a much better, balance ecosystem in the future of all those platforms. And the final graph, which is pretty much, you know, a chart giving you, a graph giving you the different ecosystem platforms, and you know how they have changed over the last few years. We see a peak in 2016 of art fairs, but also as galleries are more opening up on the continent. In the 2016 marked, you know, the launch of 2 art fairs, one in the continent, Artex Lagos Open, but also known as Africa in Paris Open. We had also 2 museums opening on the continent. We had the Zeitz Mocha that opened, as well as the Makal in Marrakech. So all this, you know, looks great for the African continent, and I'm hoping, you know, that we'll see more of that. I know a lot of different, you know, platforms that have been, you know, posed during the sanitary crisis, but there's the projects of many more, you know, museums and private foundations, which is a good thing, that are planning to open, and hopefully, you know, we'll see a much more balanced, you know, commercial platform for the years to come. But this is pretty much, you know, in one glance, you know, what is the local art market on the continent. We have seen a lot of auctions, you know, opening up their own department of African art in the past, you know, 5 to 8 years. So this is also extremely good. We function as an art fair in the primary market, but it is very important for the credibility of the market, you know, to have auction houses already, you know, supporting this segment of the market, and showing that it's not only a good investment, but, like, you know, that those artists have a value on the secondary market. So this is where we are in terms of market, and I think I'm coming at the end of you know, my presentation here, in terms of, you know, we want to see in general a more stable and steady, you know, growth, and definitely, you know, diversity of platforms. This is where we would like to be, you know, when it comes to what we see on the African continent. And in terms of, I guess, the trends and what we've been seeing in the couple of last editions of 154 and the couple of years passed back, I mean, what we saw is that there's definitely more American collectors in this past, you know, I guess, COVID year or last year, that are probably stretching beyond, you know, their African American artists at the moment, and they're starting to collect and support, you know, the spaces on the continent. We have noticed, particularly in our last edition in Paris, where we complemented it, of course, with an online platform, that most of our sales on the online platform was made in the US. So we saw this as a very big difference compared to the other editions that we had online. What we saw also is that the number of the collectors is growing on the continent from existing collectors, I think, that were mainly focused on modern art, you know, of focusing primarily on modern African art, or moving now to the contemporary art areas. We also have new collectors, you know, from a rising middle class, and I think also a younger group of collectors are increasingly seeing, you know, investing in contemporary African art as an asset class. So we see a lot of, you know, young collectors investing into contemporary art. And I think the last and final probably trend is we saw a lot of galleries that have open spaces on the continent 3 or 4 years ago, like Gallery 1957 in Accra, who has now, you know, opened a space in London. And same thing with our gallery from Addis Ababa, you know, who just opened a few years back in Ethiopia, has also opened this year a space in London. And the same thing, we have a gallery from Côte d'Ivoire who has now opened a few galleries on the continent, but also a space in Paris. So this presence in Europe is understood as a must. And you see a lot of galleries who are starting to see the benefit of being part of this, you know, international ecosystem and being present in Europe. So I think that's it for me. Claude, I don't know if you want me to.
Well, yeah, no, we have so much to talk about, but I'm gonna start with a you know, with a note of appreciation and thanking you for this survey, which kind of gives our audience and our participants a sense of what this market is like. But you kind of stole my thunder, I have to say, Turya, because my first question was gonna be about your father, because I remember in the first interview that we did on our True Africa media platform back in 2015, the first question was, why did you start 154? And you said that that essentially it was after organizing an exhibition of your father's work in London in 2011, 2012. I think his work was exhibited alongside Winston Churchill's work, that it really triggered something in you. So I guess my question is, how do you feel African artists have changed in mindsets from one generation to another? If we look at your father, Touria El Glaoui, who was a prominent artist from Morocco, and the artists that you're kind of dealing with now, who are kind of emerging artists, what has been some of the changes that you've seen in the mindsets with respect to the African art market and how they sell and view their work?
So one thing that has not changed is definitely the need of international visibility. Yeah, my father had the chance to start his career in Paris and in Europe, where he got, you know, quite a strong visibility before moving back to Morocco and trying to find a way to create a career in Morocco, where the infrastructure was not there, the gallery was non-existent. Some of his first shows were under a tent, you know, and in a hotel in Morocco. So there's a lot of things that, you know, that had to happen, you know, for having an ecosystem in Morocco that was not existing when he decided to come back to Morocco. What I would say that this has not changed. The visibility was very important, making his reputation in Europe, you know, and being part of this, you know, international market was extremely important for his career. But what we can say that has changed quite a lot between now and my father's generation is definitely the access to the social media and the international access, you know, even if you are not based in Europe or in the US, which was kind of mandatory to have a career before. Well, now with the possibility of promoting yourself, you know, on social media, you have the chance, and quite a good one, to be found and to be seen by, you know, an international curator is based in California, for example, which is something that would have not happened at my father's generation. So I think that, you know, in a way, there's a lot of tools that are now, you know, super helpful for artists, like the internet, you know, to be able to apply for residency program, to understand more about, you know, how the international art world is working. That probably on you know, with my father's generation, it was a bit more challenging. Things that have not changed is the challenge to be and give access to those artists to Europe. So I think it's as complicated as when my father and his generation had to face, you know, the traveling and the visa issues. They probably are getting even more stronger in terms of challenges, and for artists to be present, you know, even if they win a prize or something, to be able to go access a visa, to be able to get their prize is like something that is, you know, a challenge in itself. So I think that is something that I would definitely think that also has not changed. So I think the 2 points that has not changed is definitely the need of international visibility. And the second is the challenges to get access to the international market for an artist based on the continent.
So on the topic of international visibility, one thing we've noticed though, is a lot of the really prominent artists that I'll just say, we'll just call them Afro-descendants. Many of them live in London, like Zach Ovey, that was in your video earlier. If we look at the big names, right, the people whose work sell for 7 figures, like Julie Miretu's of this world. Julie Miretu lives in New York. Wangechi Mutu from Kenya, she mostly lives in New York. A lot of the really big artists are living in Paris, London, New York, Los Angeles. And one of the things that I think you've done is give more visibility to artists kind of living on the African continent. So what are some of the trends that you're seeing with respect to, you know, some of these artists who are, again, having visa issues on the continent? How do they get to be the Julie Miretus of this world? How do they get the visibility if they don't have a visa to work, or, you know, a citizenship from one of the Western countries?
Well, you know, the reality is the reality that we know is the one that we know. You know, I mean, I don't want to be discouraging, you know, the art market based on the continent, but there's definitely, you know, more visibility and probably a better path, for artists who are based in Europe or based in the, African artists who are based in Europe or to the US, because there's a biggest support system in this in these continents that if you were, based on the continent. But I know a lot of artists who are based on the continent who are now, doing very well, and they have not, had the chance to do residency program or move to Europe or to the US to do those things. I think things are changing more. The artist is recognized, and more there's visibilities, from a press perspective and from maybe the galleries helping them out and supporting them out with different letters, to get visas. There's definitely a difference that can be made. If the artist has left the country and come back to his country with a visa, usually it's easier to get another one. But I mean, you're right. I mean, the idea of this platform is definitely to make sure that the galleries are able to present artists who are based on the continent, and have less access to all those international, events, exhibitions, etc. But you have an artist like Ellen Natsui that probably a lot of people know, who is still based in Nigeria and is a teacher there, and has built his career based in Africa, so this is a good example for some of the artists, who are trying to have a role model, in terms of how did he do it, and he do it through his gallery, who in a way was based in Europe, but he never lived outside Nigeria, so that's possible. We have younger generation of artists who I would say Serge Atoukwe, from Gallery 1957, who has an extremely good visibility thanks to his galleries. He's present also through different people, in LA. There's definitely, roadmaps now that we see if you have a good local galleries, and if the gallery is doing properly its job, on the continent, that gives you access to the international market. Now, the gallery's role is very important, and I think, we see more and more galleries, doing it extremely well on the continent. Is that their role about promoting the artists, being the person who's going to take them abroad, physically, and just with their artwork, and put them in different museums and different collections. For example, being invited by a museum in the US, with a support letter for an artist, who's part of the exhibition, will definitely give him, a better chance to get a visa for the US than not being part of an exhibition in the US. So, I mean, the idea is like, try for the artists to try to grab as many opportunities as possible. Again, the galleries is the first, I guess the first promotion of this artist outside his country, and this is why they're there, to promote them internationally, but also to put them and trying to put them in the main institutions and build, relationships, of the different network, the artist has to have, to have quite a credible, CV in a way. Thank God we have more and more galleries on the continent, who are, better and bettering themselves and doing playing the role that they need to play for their artists.
Well, Turya, as somebody who's been to most 154s, whether it was in New York or London or Marrakech, one of the things I saw is that, your work is, it's very aligned with my philosophy, which, I kind of been developing since I was in my early 20s, really being inspired by Marcus Garvey's Black Star, the shipping line that was really bringing together this Pan-Africanist movement around bringing Afro-descendants from the Caribbean, from America, from Europe, and linking them with Africa. And so that's one of the things I love about how you're able to bring different Africans together, regardless of where they might be living in the world. And I think that's one of the reasons it was important for you to kind of tell the story of the genesis of 154. We have so many questions in here that I really want to get to some of them, because a lot of interesting questions as usual. But I think the burning question, which I could have asked and I should have asked, but was actually asked by one of the participants, Jan Jorneka, is, I love your screen background. Who is this artist?
So it's a fantastic Cameroonian artist called Marc Padeux. And this is a piece called The Dreamers. This artist had the chance to also be already presented at the museum in Yaoundé in Cameroon, as well as the National Gallery. And we had the chance to have him a couple of times and a couple of editions in New York and in London, thanks to Jack Bell Gallery.
And how do you spell Padeau? Because I'm not familiar with Mark's work at all.
Yes, P-A-D-E-U.
DEU. Okay, I've just put it into the chat. So that was the first question. So now Kyle Marston, who is a regular in these chats, and he usually always asks the first question. I think it's been going on for quite a few weeks now. He says that historically African art has been pillaged and put into exhibitions and museums in foreign countries for no profit for the artist. Do you feel like you're providing a sense of cultural justice for the continent?
Well, as I said, our mission was to bridge this gap, like to make sure that, this whole continent was considered in the narrative of contemporary art. So, I mean, to be honest, if we're bringing a bit of justice, it's great. What I would like to see, though, is definitely before we get to a point where we have the same debates about, those beautiful masks and those beautiful crafts, that now needs to be returned in Africa, is to see, the African collectors embrace contemporary art and start buying the right pieces at the right moment now, rather than having this debate a couple of years now saying that the most important pieces of contemporary art from the continent are now in Europe or in the US. So I want to make sure that this is a message for all the amazing young and established collector we have on the continent, is like, make sure that you support your artistic scenes locally and buy as many pieces of work as you can while you can, and they're affordable, and they you have access to them first, because it's very important.
I have a question here from Elisa Barry, who's wondering why you chose to start in London instead of New York, given that you yourself just said that New York was the center of the art world in a sense.
Well, two things. First of all, as much as I said that, and it's true, the relationship between England and Africa is much stronger than it is from US to Africa. So for me, it was important because I thought like there would be a better sense of understanding of what we're trying to do in Europe. And the second thing is, I was based in the UK, and I was starting this adventure. It was very new to me, without, having been in the art industry before. So I thought I would put most of the chances on my side, and, do and launch the fair in a city that I knew, where I had a network, rather than like started from scratch, in a place where there would be too many new variables as well, so at one point I had to understand the market where I was launching the fair, and it seems that London was a better fit for 154, just because of my knowledge of the market at the time in Europe.
Yeah, Touria, I try not to put too many transactional questions in the in there, but Joanna Zimmerman is asking a question, because this being MIT and True Africa University, a lot of questions have been about, as I said, the economy and education and policy. But she's asking a very basic and very simple question, which I'm sure other participants are wondering about. She wants to know what recommendations you would have for somebody who's just starting their art collection, who to buy from, what to look out for, any other first-time buyer tips.
It's all about, and this is where I always say that, and I know people don't believe me, but I would say, to buy what you really love, because at the end of the day, the chance that you'll have to buy some artists that will become the next Basquiat are very slim, so you will be stuck with the piece of art for quite a long time, and it's better that you like it than you don't like it and he's around just as an investment that you thought you were making. But at the end of the day, I mean, I would say, first of all, understand your budget, what you want to start collecting. I mean, I can tell you what I do. I have a limit on the price I put in a piece of work, and I trust the fact that we're a platform where we discover a lot of artists, and there's so many young artists I can support that I don't have to go straight to the ones that are the most established and that are beyond my budgets, you know. So and I want to make sure that, you know, it's not depriving me from you know, from eating or anything like that. So if you're first time buyer, I would say start with what you can afford, you know, what you really enjoy and that you can enjoy, you know, for a long time. If you have an amazing eye and you suddenly, you know, buy something that obviously you're not the only one of liking, and in a few years you know, you will sell it for a good price. But what I'll say is that, you know, we are a market that is still very accessible. So I'll say that, you know, for the moment, everybody can buy into contemporary African art, but I would try to buy by what I really enjoy and I can see myself enjoying for quite, you know, a long number of years. For the moment, you know, I've started 8 years ago. I didn't sell one piece of what I bought. I saw some of the pieces I bought, you know, take value, some, you know, less. But still, you know, making great progress since the moment I've bought them. But I don't think I would separate myself from any of them yet. You know, there will be a catalog on the next fair. I suggest, you know, for you to have a look, to try and to understand your taste. You know, if you're more into figurative rather than, you know, more abstract. You know, first of all, if you want to collect women, if you want to collect men, you know, if there's a theme you want to start collecting about, you know. So I think all the, you know, we all made differently, and I think there's definitely an aesthetic that appeals to anyone. So I would definitely say, you know, try to understand your taste, what you like, and that's the most important thing.
Teresa Adusei, she says there's continuing growth in the digital art market. And this, unfortunately, is going to have to be the last question before I get to ask my last question. And then her question is, what sense do you have of that growth amongst African artists? Are they sticking to the traditional mediums or are broadening into the digital art world? Does 154 promote this art form?
So we try to promote everything. There's definitely a majority of, you know, classic mediums like the paintings, you know, the sculptures. We would love to see more digital, you know, digital work, but they're also harder to sell. So sometimes it's not just the fault of the artist, it's also the fault of the galleries who might not find it so easy to sell, you know, you know, the new mediums are hardest to sell. And I think what we see for sure is, you know, an acceleration in everything that, you know, is being done in Europe, because everybody has access to what is being done. So artists can work on, you know, using different mediums, but they are using also mediums that nobody is using. You know, there's a lot of use of recycling material, you know, when it comes to contemporary artists from the continent. This is not often medium used, you know, in Europe or in the US. So, you know, they're sometimes leading the way with different medium that nobody think of using. But I would definitely say that there's a majority that is classic mediums, and we're hoping, you know, to promote, you know, all the new mediums. We're supporting different projects, you know, when it comes to ambitious installations. We're supporting, you know, when it comes to digital initiatives, you know, if we can, we have giving, you know, support and spaces to show those works, you know, in the past. But it's true, we don't have them enough, you know, but I think it'll come with time, and I'm not worried that we will, you know, soon be proposing the same, you know, landscape of mediums than any other art fairs is presenting.
Turya, I have to sneak one more question in, but you have to answer this one with a yes or no, because we're running out of time. We have 3 minutes left. So E. McAndrew was asking, with the necessary shift to online platforms over the last year, do you find that the virtual audience for contemporary African art has expanded?
Definitely.
Okay. That's the answer. So Touria, last question, and this is always the last question for every participant. What are 3 books that you would recommend to this audience of participants? They've come from all over the world, as we saw from the poll. 3 books that you would recommend, and we'll put them into the chat now before we conclude.
Okay, so I'm in Morocco, so I've read a couple of Moroccan books lately, Moroccan authors. So one that I really enjoy, I know it's been translated, it's from this Moroccan artist who's an amazing writer and won so many prizes, called Les Fous du Roi. And the artist and writer is called Mahi Bin Bin.
How do you spell that?
It's Mahi, M-A-H-I, and Bin Bin, B-I-N-E, B-I-N-E. and Les Fous du Roi, I guess you know how to write it. That was one of like the most exciting book, and it's not a new book, but I didn't have a chance to read it. But he was talked about so much that it really gave me the desire to read it, and it's definitely worth it. And then one author that I discovered while I was in Marrakech is Rachid Benzine.
Oh, my friend.
You know him?
Yeah.
Okay. And it's this book that he wrote called Nour, Pourquoi je n'ai rien vu venir, which is letters between a father and a daughter, which is quite amazing on Islam and the different, vision of. It's really well done. I don't want to say more, but it's a book that you need to read. It made me cry, to be honest. And
me too.
I really enjoyed it. And the one that I'm reading right now, I don't know if it's of interest of anybody, but it's fun and it's really nice to be able to read the biography of somebody that you know. It's called 100 Summers. 100 Summers. It's Vanessa Branson, the sister of Richard Branson, who started a lot of art initiative in Marrakech, and I had the chance to know her in Marrakech, so it was very nice to start reading her biography. I'm in the middle of it, but it's quite interesting to see how she researched her family, and you can see the adventurous part of her family in there already, and the grandparents, and it's fun. It's fun to read about people you know.
Wow. So we've come to the end of this talk. I wanted to really, I just wish we could just keep going each time, but I do want to remind you of the talk for next week. And next week we have Maya Horgan Famodu, who will be talking about basically technology. This is going to be interesting to a lot of MIT people. How does one go about investing in African technology companies? She's a venture capitalist, so her perspective is going to be really interesting. Once again, I want to thank our partners in this venture, MIT Africa and the MIT Center for International Studies. I'm Claude Grunitzky. This was True African University. And if you want to watch it again, all the interesting things that Turya said, you can go to trueafricauniversity.com where all our videos are. A huge thank you for Touria El Glaoui, one of the most powerful, fearless, determined women in Africa. Thank you and have a great evening or morning, wherever you might be. Bye.